Hey guys, it's Mike here from Team HoonHay, and today I'm bringing you a Magikey deck profile which I used to get top 4 in this weekend's Dunedin OTS Championship. Now the reason that I went with this deck was because I enjoy the playstyle, and with the new support from Bode, it does let it play through hand traps so that it can still establish somewhat niche boards that some decks do struggle to play around. So without further ado, I'll get right into it. To start off with the monsters that I play in my deck, I play 3 copies of Magikey McMusket, which is the level 4 ritual monster. This guy you have to play at max. On summon, he adds any Magikey card from deck to your hand, so it lets you extend into your plays, lets you pick out any card that you need to keep going, and ideally you do want to see it in your opening hand more than anything else. The next card that I play is 1 copy of Magikey McMortar. Some people choose to play 2. I only choose to play 1, mostly because for the most part it's a brick. You don't want to see it in your opening hand, and typically you're ending the board with this guy and a bunch of other negates, so most of the time you'd rather see extenders and openers rather than this guy. He does have a floating effect where if he leaves the field he can search for another Magikey card, but more often than not that's not the effect that you really want to use, because his effect to negate is just so much more better and more useful than anything else. The next card that we play is the new Magikey card from Burst of Destiny, which is the magnificent Magikey Mafteal. So what this guy does is that if you control a Magikey monster on the field, you can reveal him in your hand, and then he lets you get an extra normal summon for the turn with Magikey cards. Now what makes that good is you don't need to use the normal summon straight away. You can use it later on in the combo, and it doesn't matter if you don't have any more Magikeys on the field. As long as you've revealed him, you can use the extra normal summon. On normal summon, he can summon any level 4 or lower Magikey monster from your graveyard, or any vanilla monster, level 4 monster from your graveyard. So what that lets you do is that you can essentially go into a rank 4 or a synchro straight away, but it is limited to the Magikey XZs and the Magikey synchro monster. For the most part, you are going to go into the synchro, the Magikey synchro anyway, so it's really good in terms of extending your plays. Once you've used its effect, it doesn't matter if you get nibbed, you can at least end on the synchro. And then the next cards that we play are 3 copies of vanilla. You just max out on them. Use a vanilla. The deck runs on vanillas. It's also a Magikey name for the purpose of the magnificent Magikey Mafteal. So if you open with unexpected die or just him, you can just it can really get you going to begin with. The other vanillas that I play are 2 copies of Angel Trumpeter and 1 copy of Robotic Knight. So I played Trumpeter because 1, it's an earth type, and 2, it's a tuner. So that lets you combo off into needle fiber plays with unexpected die, or Link Spider summon the Trumpeter from your hand, stuff like that. So it's a really good card to open with. It's a really good card to extend with. It's just overall a must in this deck. The last card that I played is a Robotic Knight. Some people choose to play the Gunkin Suship, and it kind of makes sense. It's the strongest level 4 vanilla fire, but I choose to play Robotic Knight because it also, on top of that, it is a machine type. So what that lets you do is, depending on certain hands, you can still go into your Auroradon, so that it doesn't. So if Needle Fiber gets stopped, you can keep going. Or if you were forced to use 001 as your tuner for Needle Fiber, you can. If you have this guy, you can still go into Auroradon as another machine. Next cards that I play are the bricks. So in this deck I'm playing the Auroradon combo. So I play 001 and the Make a Phantom Beast Cult Wing. 001 is not really ideal to have in your opening hand, but just like I highlighted before, I play Robotic Knight as an extra machine, and something that's worth noticing is the Meg Musket is also a machine, so you can set up a field so that even if the Halka Firebrax gets stopped or the 001 is used for the Halka Firebrax, you can still go into Auroradon and continue playing. The Cold Wing is the only hard brick in the deck, but it's not completely the end of the world if you draw it, because the deck does have ways to put it back into your deck through the field spell, which makes playing the bricks not inherently too terrible, but it is still pretty bad if you draw it. Next, hand traps. I play 3 copies of Cypher Gear Gamma as well as the Driver. Driver is pretty funny because it's a vanilla, so it can do stuff with the Magikey cards. A lot of starters in the deck are spell cards, so for the most part, you want to stop the hand traps that they try to do to stop your field spell, your unexpected dies, your Magikey spell, and all that kind of stuff. So you do want to have the Gamma. It also lets you go into to Omega to rip out a card from your hand, out from your opponent's hand, and if it comes down to it, it serves as a starter to Needle Fiber if you can bait out a hand trap during your own turn. Next card that I play is 2 copies of Ash Blossom. I played 2 because I want it as my crossout target, and on top of that, it's not terrible to draw. It's not that great in this current format, but it does do a lot of work against a lot of the more niche, roguish tier 2 decks and such. And then the last hand traps that I play are 1 copy of Veiler and 1 copy of Impermanence. So similar to Ash Blossom, these guys are essentially just crossout targets. If I draw them, it's not too bad. I can still use them on my opponent. But for the most part, I do want to try to go first and just cross out any Veilers, any Impermanences that I can, that my opponent tries to use to stop my combos. The only reason that I don't play anymore is because the deck is pretty tight. It's sitting at 40. Don't really want to play any more than that, just so that I don't really hurt my consistency. So yeah. Now on to the spells. So for the spells, I play 3 copies of the field spell, Magikey World. So what this card does is that on activation, you add any Magikey monster from deck to hand, so it's already a +1 with that. And then the second effect is what really makes this deck pretty good when it comes to doing Auroradon combos. So with the secondary effect, once per turn, you can add Magikey Maftia from your deck to your hand, and then return 1 card from your hand to the bottom of your deck. So what that does essentially is that you get to add the Magikey spell card, which acts as the fusion spell and the ritual spell, and then also return a brick that you don't want to see in your hand back to your deck. So that's, that could be the 001 or the Cult Wing. So in terms of drawing bricks, it's not completely terrible as long as you see the field spell, which makes this deck inherently good when it comes to not wanting to see bricks. The next card that I play is Magikey Maftia, which is the core of the deck, and what makes this deck pretty neat is it essentially functions as both the ritual spell and the fusion spell, and as a result of that, it doesn't actually have the ritual tagline on it, so you can't bring it back with something like prep or anything like that, which does kind of make it a little bit bad. But then what it can do makes up for it in the sense that if you have a normal monster on the field, when you ritual summon or fusion summon, you can use a material from your deck as long as the material is also a normal monster. So in some sense, it is like a shadow fusion if you have a normal monster on the field, which makes it really nice for putting more bodies on board and continue with your plays. Then the last Magikey spell and trap card that I play is Magikey Unlocking. This is essentially a counter trap that negates a spell or trap, so it helps you play around stuff like droplets, dark ruler, lightning storm, all that kind of jazz. And when you do activate it to negate something, what you can do is declare an attribute, and all your opponent's monsters become that attribute. So if you're missing a specific attribute because your opponent stopped you during your play, so you couldn't get a specific attribute into the graveyard for the purpose of negating with the ritual, or trying to pop one of your opponent's monsters with the synchro monster, then this lets you get around that restriction. The next cards that I play are extenders, or somewhat starters. So we have one terraforming. Field spell is just amazing in this deck. You want to see it as often as you can. And then also play 3 copies of Unexpected Die. You want to try get a normal monster onto the field as often as possible. You want to have one sitting there ready to go, so that your Maftia becomes essentially a Foolish Burial to get more materials in your graveyard without without going neg on the ritual summon or the fusion summon. So it's definitely a requirement, and this lets you fetch out either a tuner in the form of Angel Trumpeter, or a Magikey monster in the form of the Magikey vanilla, so that you can really extend your plays with magnificent Magikey Maftail. Another card that I play is Instant Fusion. It's simply an extender. The Magikey monster that you summon off with it is a tuner, so you can go into Needle Fiber with it. It's also level 4, so it really complements your deck's playstyle with wanting to go into rank 4s and level 8 synchros. The other cards that I play are 2 copies of Advanced Controller. The entire deck is mostly vanilla monsters, and you want to be just dumping them with Advanced Ritual Art. Lets you dump whatever material you need, so that you have the correct attributes in the graveyard for the negates and pops with your Magikey boss monsters. I've considered running it 3, but 2 has worked out fine for now. So I guess we'll see later on if I choose to change it. Next thing that I play are 3 copies of Crossout Designator. You want to stop hand traps, simple as that. While you can play through a Needle Fiber negate, you'd rather just skip all that and just combo off and just make an unbreakable board and just force your opponent to scoop. So you just want to keep playing. And then the last card is Called by the Grave. Same thing as Crossout. Sometimes there are certain hands where you need to stop 2 hand traps, so having the Called by the Grave along with the Crossout is just insane for comboing. So for the extra deck, I play 1 copy of the Magikey XZ, 1 copy of the Magikey Fusion, and 1 copy of the Magikey Synchro. As I highlighted before, the Fusion acts as my instant fusion target. Lets you go into Needle Fiber since it is a tuner, and since it's level 4 as well, it really complements with the deck's playstyle of wanting to go into rank 4s as well as level 8 synchros. So so I feel like it is a definite must-have. You want to play it at least at once, so you do have backups in case you don't draw, or if you don't have a way into any of the rituals, so you can make at least a fusion instead. The new additions with Burst of Destiny into the deck is the Synchro and the XZ. So the XZ is really good in the way that if it has any normal monster as one of its materials, when it battles a monster, you can force your opponent to send that monster to the graveyard straight away. So what that means is that it plays around monsters that are unaffected by card effects like Ultimate Falcon or the Arrival Cyrus boss monster. So it's just another way to out beefy guys that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. On summon, it also lets you add a Magikey, a normal monster from deck to hand, which is okay, but it's not completely terrible either. It does mean that the following turn you do have at least 1 normal monster in your hand that you can summon and start doing stuff with. And the Synchro monster is an absolute beast of a card. while it requires a Magikey tuner and a vanilla to make him, which does restrict in how flexible it is, on summon is once he's on the field, he can essentially pop anything that your opponent summons. Granted, you have that attribute in your graveyard. So by the end of the combo, when you have all 6 attributes in the graveyard except for Divine Beast, you can essentially pop whatever monster your opponent summons in certain scenarios or against certain decks. Could be an absolute game ender for them. Prankids is a typical example of needing that normal summon, completely gets crushed by this card. The other thing that makes the Synchro really good is the fact that it can set any Magikey spell trap from your deck straight onto the field. And since you control a Magikey that was summoned from the extra deck, the counter trap is also live. So at minimum, with just the Synchro and the counter trap, you've already got a monster pop and a spell and trap negate, which is really annoying for some decks to play around. So the next cards that we play are the Synchros. So play 1 Link Spider, 1 Christian Haka Firebrax, 1 Mika Phantom Beast Auroradon, and 1 Access Code. These are the only Synchros that I play. So the Link Spider acts as a play extender and a backup. If you get Nibiru, you can get rid of it for a Link Spider and then summon a vanilla off from your hand to continue doing stuff. And it also serves as a somewhat of a starter where if you open the any of the vanilla tuners, you can turn any normal monster into Link Spider and then bring out the tuner from your hand and then go into Haka Firebrax and make some plays. These two, I don't think I really need to explain it. Haka Firebrax combos, Haka Firebrax bring out 001, go into Auroradon, summon 3 tokens, then 001, do some crazy stuff, and then go to town, make an unbreakable board, and then your opponent scoops. It's essentially pretty stock standard. The way that I do the combos is slightly different, so in the next video I'll put together a combo video showing how to do combo with Magikeys, as it is different from your typical Auroradon combos. And the last card is Access Code. This can literally be anything else. Doesn't really matter what you play. It's a flex spot is what I would call it. I almost never go into it because either my opponent scoops already before then, or I'm already dead by that point. Because typically what happens is that Auroradon will stay on the field if it stays on the field for more than 1 turn, that lets me go into Access Code. But like I said, it never gets to that point typically. I'm either dead by that point or my opponent's dead at that point. Next cards that I play are 2 copies of Herald of Arclight. It's a ritual deck. You want to see it, you do Auroradon stuff with 001, spam this guy out, you can get a negate on board as well as a search. The card's just nuts. Another thing that it's really useful for is for Haka Firebrax. If Hulk gets negated, you can during your opponent's turn you can banish it and summon this guy out, and it forces your opponent to play around their cards getting banished as well as a negate. And if they do get rid of it, it's also a search, so it acts as a follow-up for your following turn. The other card another synchro that I play is Christian Quandax. Now this card serves 2 different purposes in the deck. 1, it's a level 4, and 2, it's a tuner. So the reason that the level 4 is relevant is that in the tail end of the combo, you do want to get another level 4 on board so that you can overlay with the Cult Wing to make a rank 4. And then the reason that the tune is really good is when you make Savage in the deck, Savage, because of his effect, has to take the Haka Firebrax from your graveyard and equip it to himself. That means that you won't have a water in your graveyard for the purpose of negating or popping with your Synchro and your Ritual. So you do want to go into Quandax first to at least put a water in the graveyard, and then that way you can pretty much negate every attribute in the game. And like I said, I also play Savage. It's a Omnigate, big beefy, big beefy guy. So, and you make synchro, level 8 synchros really easily. So there's no reason to not play it. Other cards that I play is Dawn Dragster and Cyframe Lord Omega. Omega because Gamma lets you rip out a card from your hand essentially. It's pretty decent. Can technically be a flex spot, but I found it really useful in comparison to other rank 8s that level 8s that I was thinking about playing. I also played Dawn Dragster. Has a built-in spell and trap negate up to 3 times, so against a lot of decks that like to use spells and traps, this is a lot of a better option than going to Savage. So some boards I might end on Dawn Dragster instead of Savage, just so that I have a lot more spell and trap negates for those types of decks. And then the last 2 cards that I play is Dagaris the Timeless and Abystola. So Dagaris is part of the combo. You can I use it to revive something, to put another tuner on board that I've used earlier that turn to let me go into Savage or Dawn Dragster, or if I just need a vanilla on field for the purpose of using the Magikey spell, it lets me bring a card out just for the purpose of that. I play Abystola. Abystola is more of a really is another flex spot. I play Dweller because against certain decks like Prank Kids, against Phantom Knights, it's complete game ender for them if they don't open the Forbidden Chalice or the Impermanence on their standby on their draw phase. So some against those decks, instead of making Savage or Dragster, I'll overlay the 2/4s into Abystola, and I just know that it's gonna be a lot more impactful than any other cards. But like I said, it is a flex spot, so you can put whatever you want in there based on whatever you're expecting to face. So I guess that concludes my deck list. I guess the other thing that I can go over is the side deck that I decided to play. So for this event, I decided to play 3 copies of Nibiru. Breaks boards if your opponent can't play through it. Just don't really want to deal with big combo decks and letting them just set up unbreakable boards, so it's pretty good. And I typically in games 2 and 3, I'll always leave 1 in my deck purely because of cross out, so that if my opponent sides in Nibiru, I can at least cross it out and stop my board from being broken. I also play 3 copies of Gamer Seal. This slot can really be anything I wanted. I was deciding between another hand trap like Droplets or Lancia, but I decided to go with the Gamer Seal. I just found that certain monsters are a little bit of a pain to deal with, like Shinshin. So I just didn't want to have to deal with that. So I'd rather just give him the big turtle and then just play my deck as per usual. Play 1 copy of Dunedin Prankatops. It's a very multi-purpose tool for removal. Plays around back row quite a lot. Can potentially get rid of 2 things at once. So you know it does a lot. It's an extremely good card. Play 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More. It's a pretty decent board breaker. There's really not much to say about this. If my opponent sets up a big board, I just Dark Ruler them and then crack their board nice and slowly and then win the game from there. Play 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone. So against back row decks, I prefer Cyclone over Twin Twister because I prefer to have more cards in my hand than less. And with that new Heavenly Prison card that came out of Bode, who protects set back row from destruction, this has just become infinitely better in that aspect. And then the last cards that I play are Harpy's Feather Duster and Red Reboot. Just a more general back row hate, really. The deck struggles with anything that kind of just sets 5 and passes. That's why I do play the Dawn Dragster as well. So that concludes the video.
This is ground control to Major Tom. I'm doing your mom, and I'm doing her in the most